then that can save a significant amount of time over that of what we've seen from other teams. They also do the patent pending, run it down mid strategy, and then you snap your tank to Razan. But we're going to see how it ends up working out for both sides in just a moment.
All right, let's get into it. Atal'Dazar starts right now between Complexity Limit and Deplete from Beyond.
I can feel the power.
And right away, we're going to have to see how the snap goes. Because right away, the biggest issue that we saw from Complexity Limit was when they did this snap, the mob snapped behind Max here and he instantly went down. But you can see instantly that change was made. They committed the bubble to him right away so that he wouldn't instantly go down. And Complexity Limit is off to the races here, and it worked well for them. So no major issues this time from them. Deplete from Beyond going for a similar strategy, and their trash pack is still alive and not yet melted. Those unholy DKs are going to have to do work for them here. Once somebody's mantles go off here, which could be an issue if heals go off afterwards, and Clix has multiple wildfire debuffs, but he's able to get healed through it, and only the Juggernauts are left alive. So both teams able to deal with the trash pulls, but 12% more trash with trash mobs still to die on Deplete from Beyond side.
Yeah, that was actually a huge amount of trash they pulled on top here on Deplete from Beyond side. That was crazy, and the amount of healing coming out of Eagle here as well. He had 250k HPS, and Clix almost went down with all of those debuffs and all of those casts going off because of that mantle that makes the mobs immune to CC. So there was no way for them to get any more interrupts off. So incredibly well done by them to be able to finish off this pull by having just all of those casts going through. And Complexity Limit, on the other hand, this is the pull they actually wiped on yesterday. So they did clean up their play. They didn't have any deaths at all. Perfectly clean execution on this trash plus Razan pull. But yeah, we'll see how they catch up on the trash they're missing. We saw them do this double Colossus pull yesterday, and they also wiped there. So let's see if they can pull it off this time around.
Oh yeah, I mean, they had a ton of more issues yesterday, so we'll have to keep an eye on them, make sure they're playing clean too. I'm interested to see what the major difference is going to be here in trash percentages, because it looks like Deplete from Beyond put this trash that Complexity Limit is gearing up for on top of their boss. They're waiting for Atrocity, it looks like, to get in position for this pull. I don't actually see where he is on screen right now. This is quite weird. There comes the misdirect. Oh, he's going back and getting the Colossus. That's what it was. And they're going for this massive pull here with the double Colossus, I believe. Yep, double Colossus coming in here. So it's going to be a lot of damage needed to come out from the Unholy DKs, and we're going to have to be able to deal with it. That Colossus running in late is going to be an issue, though. It didn't get some of that initial AoE burst, so they're going to have to deal with single target damage on it afterwards, and they're just going to have to kite this, because look at the HP on that Colossus. It is massive and has half HP still.
Yeah, this is actually going to be crazy. They might actually have to Shadow Melt off the aggro. We'll see as Max is trying to kite, but it does so much damage to him. He's trying to tank it off. This is actually quite impressive that he's managing to even tank this at all. And now he's... Yeah, it's just so much damage. Look how huge this thing is. But they did manage to finish it off now.
Oh no!
But Deplete from Beyond having 2 deaths as they pulled everything on top of Priestess here. Mystical going down too. This is going to be a full team wipe. There's no way there's any way for them to recover this. And this is a huge amount of time loss for Deplete from Beyond.
That was a ridiculous pull from Complexity Limit as well. They went from 18 to 57% trash. 39% of the trash wiped off the board just like that. And even with a little bit of an inconsistency, that Colossus being massive, chunking Max with a 70% of his max HP melee, we'll see if Complexity Limit is able to pull off this pull. It looks like the Holy DKs have their damage set and are starting to go to town here. Well, the DKs are still alive. They should be able to get that damage off, and that's going to be the major thing here. If the DKs can stay alive, they should be able to finish the trash off. And the Hunters keep holding his own too. Of course, DKs do a little bit less damage when they don't have the cooldowns available, but they're still able to turn that AoE into single target damage. But unfortunately, Eric and Fired Up have gone down here. They only have 1 battle res available. They have to somehow deal with the rest of this trash, though. It looks like they're going to get Fired Up and alive, but this is really unfortunate. The boss also got some healing off too, and they're probably going to have to get through 2 more transfusion phases, even if they're able to pull this together. The problem is, once they start going further on into the fight, those Hunter freezing traps are going to start coming back off cooldown, and they're going to have to make sure they keep those masks CC'd. These transfusions from the Priestess are finally dealt with here, but we're going to have to keep an eye on this transfusion from the boss here. As long as they all have the debuffs, they should be fine, but that was a scary moment there from Complexity Limit with 2 deaths on the board. No battle res on the board left for them as well, so they might not have that available for the final boss if they're playing clean.
Dr. J going down for Deplete from Beyond. They do have a battle res available. They get him back up immediately. And this is an insane pull that Deplete from Beyond is doing here. In fact, not only did they pull the whole Priestess room on top of Priestess, but they also pulled the 2 Juggernaut packs that are at the bottom next to the obelisk. So they seed the Confessors with the Freezing Trap by the Hunters, and then Rentari just ran through, picked up all of the trash except the Colossus, and pulled it all the way to Priestess. So this is why they had so much problems with this pull. This is an insane pull coming out of the Deplete from Beyond. They now managed to finish off most of the trash. Did have 1 death on Dr. J, but with the Battle Rest being available to them, they're gonna get all of the damage on Priestess. Unfortunately, Rentari didn't get that blood debuff here, so instead of damaging the boss, Rentari was unfortunately healing the Priestess here.
They still have that Juggernaut alive at full HP, and Misty Igloo goes down, and they don't have a battle res for him. There's no healer alive. They're gonna somehow have to heal themselves through this next transfusion, and probably have to get another transfusion afterwards with only 4 players alive. Deplete from Beyond could be throwing this dungeon right now, but even on the other side with Complexity Limit, we saw Twisted dropping incredibly low there to this trash pull, but he is able to heal himself up with that Way of the Crane, so it looks like Complexity Limit is back stable, but Rentari is going down to the transfusion, and with Priestess Saloons at 11%, there's no way they're gonna be able to finish it off, and it's going to be another full team wipe for Deplete from Beyond.
Yeah, just so many problems on this pull for Deplete from Beyond. As Complexity Limit, though, on the other hand, they're already onto this trash pull here, where they pulled the whole middle pack and some more trash onto this ledge here. So they were snapping the whole trash onto this, making sure that the swords are not jumping on, because once you are on this ledge, they're not actually jumping onto the rest of your team. And on top of that, the charge that these Raptors are doing are not going out either. So this is definitely a very safe way for them to deal with this trash. And look at the percentage. Once they're done with this trash, they're gonna be done with the percentage in the whole dungeon with the Awakened mobs that they still have to deal with. They're probably going to kite the Awakened mobs though, so they need to get to 100%, because if they choose to kite the obelisk, then they of course will not get the percentage. There we go, 100% trash percentage now for Complexity Limit.
And it looks like they're just going to be going obelisk skip to Volcall, and then obelisk skip to the final. Well, they don't need to obelisk skip to the final boss, right? They can just run to the final boss. So yeah, Complexity Limit done with all the trash, and it looks like they're clearly going to be kiting obelisk trash like we saw yesterday as well. So only bosses left, and with 7 minutes left in the dungeon, that mark that we saw from the regular season will be a sub 10-minute run. I doubt they'll go below that, but if I had to guess, with clean play, it could end up being something around an 11-minute run, so we'll see if they're able to keep it clean.
Yeah, definitely. Incredible run by Complexity Limit so far. And Atal, I mean, it seems like not a very difficult dungeon, but in the MDI, it becomes so much more difficult just because how fast you can go. And in the MDI, if there's something you can do, then you have to pull it off, right? But just because the other team is going to pull it off, and if you want to compete with their time, you have to do it too. And this is why we see those insane pulls coming out in Atal'Dazar. It's just one huge pull into another. Even though you're running out of offensive cooldowns and defensive cooldowns, you just have to chain big pull into big pull. And this is why there's so many issues for these teams, specifically in a dungeon like Atal'Dazar, which usually seems like a dungeon that is not insanely difficult, but they're making it difficult on themselves because of just a huge amount of time pressure that you have when those big pulls are possible to do.
Oh yeah, for sure. And one of the things I want to touch on as well is, it looks like we have some observer lag on the side of Complexity Limit there, is, there we go, nice and caught up. One of the things I want to touch up on as well is, we talked about this as well yesterday in their Atal'Dazar, right? Perplex ended up essentially throwing their Atal'Dazar run by not opting to go for a safer strategy on Yasma. Do you think this is a situation where Complexity Limit might want to consider doing that? We've talked about this, I think, a lot on broadcast, but with the lead that they have, with the 9 deaths on the board, as well as probably about a 3-minute lead in terms of dungeon progression, it almost makes sense to consider going for a safer strat. But I'm not really sure what a safer strat would be, right? Would you like kill 2 awakened mobs and then pull the last boss with 2, or I think you just have to commit to the kite strat, right? And you have to consider in your mind there's no way you're going to wipe 2 at 3 times.
Yeah, I almost think you have to commit, because like killing 1 obelisk is still not gonna make the killing strat easier, right? If you have to kite anyway, then it doesn't matter if there's 3 awakened mobs or 4 or 2, right? So either you kill as many obelisks as you can to be able to not having to do the kiting strat, but the last boss is pretty dangerous to play with awakened mobs, and therefore I don't think you can play it with 3. So you would have to deal with 2 obelisks, and I think that will just be too much of a time loss. I don't think, I mean, yeah, they're far ahead, but at some point it's just going to be too much time that you spend dealing with those obelisks.
Yeah, and they're not as far ahead of Deplete from Beyond as they were behind yesterday versus Perplex. So it's not like they have all the time in the world to throw at this dungeon here. And unfortunately, during this skip, it looks like Eric wasn't able to get his Feint Death off, so he's going to be going down with Shadow Meld off on cooldown. They'll just get a quick res on him from Twisted. They've got that time to spare right now, but this is going to be close. If they end up having some catastrophic failures here on this boss, it could let Deplete from Beyond back into the dungeon. So any small mistake like that, the nerves have got to be pounding right now for them.
Yeah, definitely. And this boss, it really takes a long time. It has so much HP, even on a fortified setting. So they're going to have to play perfectly for a long time if you do this kiting strat. Not only does Twisted have to kite the Awaken mobs perfectly and make sure they're not somehow snapping back to the group, but the rest of the team needs to survive without a healer. And the Soul Rend does quite a bit of damage once it does go off on the group. So definitely want to make sure to deal with all of that properly.
Yeah, and just taking a look at their gear here, none of them are running that rebooting bitband. They're all running overclocking bitbands for that extra damage, the extra haste that they get. They're just going to be solely relying on the death strikes from the DKs and probably just, I don't know, some sort of passive leech or exhilaration on the hunter. And it looks like it's really unfortunate timing already for Atrocity, as he's gotten 15 stacks of that eye corruption. So he's going to have to pop a personal cooldown or maybe that aspect of the turtle for the very first soul rend, just so he doesn't get one shot by it, because it does do about 50 to 60% of your HP on this difficulty. He does pop the exhilaration to heal himself up.
Yeah, there we go. Has to already use that acceleration to be able to stay alive. Now, the Death Knights shouldn't have as big of a problem as Atrocity on the Hunter, just because they can Death Strike themselves up to full HP, so they do have a lot of self-healing available to them. But another thing is also just the tank, right? Max staying alive on this boss. Yasma does do quite a bit of tank damage with that tank ability that she casts. So definitely want to be careful with that one. And then on top of that, sometimes it's unavoidable almost to not get hit by one of those spiders if you're the tank, because you do need to interrupt that cast that she does on a random target. If you don't interrupt that one, then you're gonna have a death on one of the players. So sometimes when the group is baiting the soul rend and the tank is the only one who can really interrupt, it can be very dangerous positioning wise as well. So definitely gotta make sure that Max stays alive here.
It is important to mention that Twisted is kiting incredibly close to his targets for one reason alone. Samarek the Beckoner likes to stop and stop running a lot, especially on that staircase with the fire puddles. So he's really making sure he cuts it close. And we saw the beautiful paralyze as well as tank on that mob, but it looks like Yasma is going to go down for complexity limit. And while it doesn't really measure up to the faster runs that Atal'Dazar we've seen, this sort of clean-ish run we've seen from them is what we want to see more of moving forward.
It really is, and big congratulations to Complexity Limit for getting some redemption as well, because like you mentioned, Zyro, it's not the fastest we've ever seen, but I think that there's a number of critical areas that Settles could tell us about that, hey, they can start making some improvements, they can start getting to that point.
I do believe that they can absolutely get to that point, but for Atal'Dazar, I feel like this is kind of a cursed dungeon with how people are trying to just pull it now. Once you start snapping your tank to the mobs as opposed to your tank snapping the mobs to you, you're kind of, everything's just kind of up in the air for
this is not the natural order.
Dude, Deplete from Beyond wiped to what is a typical pull, yet somehow they pull off by far the hardest pull I've ever seen with double Colossus with Razan. This dungeon is so much on a knife's edge, exactly, so much on a knife's edge that any one mistake can just completely ruin your run. And being able to recover from mistakes and pick yourselves back up very quickly is something that needs to be shown in Atal'Dazar, and Complexity Limit did a good job of doing that this time.
Absolutely, and that's also part of what makes it so exciting as well, I think, Nagura, is that, Yasma might have some crazy stats on her as they're fighting the boss, but it's not really her so much as it is everything going on with the boss as well.
Yeah, I mean, Yasma specifically, not only because you have this huge kiting strat going on that is just so incredibly important for the healer to pull off, but just this whole dungeon, I think there's just never a moment where you can breathe for a second. The only time that you can relax a little is Volkal, because you can't really pull anything on top of Volkal, right? Everything else in this dungeon, the way those teams are playing it, it's just like constant stress and constant like full focus, and any sort of mistake will just cause a full team wipe. So Atal'Dazar, the way those teams play this dungeon is just incredible.
That's right. And Yasma, fun boss for them to deal with, and thankfully it's not going to be taking too terribly long because they have to deal with it on Fortified. But just imagine if this was on Tyrannical, Zyro, how much longer we'd be expecting some of those kiting routes to go out for the healers.
I was looking at that graphic for a second there, and one thing didn't make sense to me. How was there a full wipe, but the peak lives claimed was only 4? Did somebody pull the boss with only 4 people alive?
They might have just ran off of the balcony that she stands on.
That's true. The 4 died, and they were kiting the mobs. So okay, there we go. Got it. Nailed it.
We got it, Scoob.
Yeah, it's good to see that execution there, because clearly the kiting there, that final boss is incredibly difficult with no healer, and we've seen some of the best teams have issues there. So it's good to see that they're able to pull that kind of thing off here. And then, moving forward into Workshop, it's another execution heavy dungeon, especially on this bolstering that we have.
That's right, and especially when you're going to be looking at, like you mentioned, with bolstering, but also it's pretty fairly on the rails as well, titles here. They just really need to start coming down to some crisp execution.
I do think that is probably in Deplete from Beyond's favor typically, just in terms of being able to get off that perfect execution. But we've seen a lot of sloppy matches across the whole entire weekend, not even just with Deplete from Beyond versus Complexity Limit. I think we've seen a lot of sloppy matches compared to how much practice these teams have gotten. They got 2 weeks worth of practice, but I think that kind of tells you how much or how hard these dungeons are to be able to do perfectly, and the innovations and strategies that the teams are trying to execute.
That's right. Let's start talking about some of those larger pulls that required such crisp execution from Atal'Dazar. What do you got for us?
Oh, dude, you're gonna love this. All right, so first and foremost, we have the double Colossus Razan snap. Man, this is so good. I watched it, and I was sitting there in the replay, and I was like, holy moly, if they pull this off, this is going to be such a sick Atal'Dazar. And it's the same pull that Complexity Limit does here, except it's with Razan. And I'm like, man, it's so good. All right, I love it. Complexity Limit also does this pull and does it pretty cleanly. They had a Colossus that got pretty big. No harm, no foul. Nothing ended up coming of it. It wasn't great, but it ended up being okay. And then Deplete from Beyond starts having problems on Priestess Alunza. Being able to bait those Juggernauts is really scary because of their charge. So, especially whenever you are doing 2 of them, understandably, Deplete from Beyond ends up having a full wipe once people do end up start going down. Twisted does a great job of kiting the Awakened mobs, running through the Fire Gauntlet and just doing that to perfection. And Complexity Limit's able to take the first map.
That's right. And I love how Twisted, and I believe some other healers have been doing this as well. They've been holding on to their Dampen Harm just in case they needed to run through the fire, either for extra aggro if they needed to heal themselves some more, or if just the timing wasn't working out. I really like that, because I always remember seeing during the regular season, Nagura, where all the healers would pop every single defensive and then just bolt. And sometimes there are times where they're going to be taking a melee swing or 2, or they have to go through any of the Fire Gauntlet as well. So I love to see that extra little bit of prep where they say, I actually don't really need this.
Yeah, it's really just min-maxing everything exactly to be sure that you have that extra defensive available later on. And it is incredibly important to have it, right? Because if you have a bad timing with the Fire Gauntlet, 1 tick is probably fine to survive on this key level. But if you have to get through multiple, you're definitely going to be in big trouble if you don't have any sort of defensives available. So I really like the fact that they changed the way they're dealing with this kiting strat. And we've also seen a lot less problems with the mobs snapping back. We've also seen a lot less problems with the mobs snapping to the healer. So I think that the healers definitely evolved and got better with this whole kiting strat. So it's really nice to see.
Most definitely. And let's start talking about Workshop, Zyro. You love to see the stats. Let's start looking at Machinist Garden. And we are going to be looking at some of the Tyrannical stats that we have for it.
And it's kind of crazy that the numbers aren't higher for this boss, because everyone knows that this boss is a run killer, especially on higher Tyrannical levels. Once you start getting into those later portions of the fight where you have 8 of those cogwheels bouncing around, you have multiple dead plants putting dodgeable fire spots on the ground, it's so difficult to make sure you dodge everything. And we're getting into that point where this boss is going to last for a solid 2.5 minutes in this 21 setting. So we're really going to have to keep an eye on how these players are playing. But I want to pose something interesting to you guys for Workshop, a little bit of insider information. You ready for this?
Ooh, leaks.
Detail.
All right.
Void Elves.
For 4?
Like, are they going to skip
We'll
to?
find out.
Well, are they going to
We'll
skip?
find out.
Are they going to skip into Machinist's Garden? Can you use the Void Elf blink to go through the gate of Machinist and then go straight into Machinist's Garden without having to take the obelisk over there?
I know as much as you do. All I know is that they're going to be running Void Elves here. I don't know what for. We're going to have to pay very close attention.
I wonder if they could use
Void
that.
Elf is pretty bad damage ratio, isn't it? Isn't it like magic damage dealt?
I think it's increased damage on a proc rate. I think it's 5% increased damage on a proc rate.
Yeah, that's right. There's some special proc that you have to do with it. Okay, I'm extraordinarily curious to see what this is going to mean for both of these teams. Let's take it away as Workshop is underway.
And we already see the mage here come out of complexity limit. Not really surprised, to be honest. I think we expected the mage to come out of limit just because they've been playing it in almost every single triple hunter dungeon. And we've also seen them play the mage in the cups, specifically here in Workshop, just because Workshop is probably the one dungeon where mage just gets the most benefit. Not only is it a lot easier to deal with the awakened mobs on the last boss, but also the third boss pull gets easier if you have the combustion. But we have Bolstering this time around, so they cannot pull the trash on top of Rixa immediately.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we're in a little 20-second timer here. Of course, once that trash goes down, it takes 20 seconds for the RP to start this dungeon off. And that's all the information I got right now. I want to know what the Void Elves are for, because for those of you in chat who don't know, the sort of special racial that Void Elf has, it's called Spatial Rift. So what's the best way of describing it? It's kind of like Reaper from Overwatch. You send an orb forward, and then when you press the ability again, you port to that orb, and I think it can go about 30 yards. So it's essentially a 30-yard blink, and I would imagine they're going to use that to skip something in the dungeon. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm really interested to see what it is.
Me too. This is going to be super interesting. We're definitely going to have to pay attention onto complexity limit to see what they're doing with this racial. Deplete from Beyond having some issues here as Rentari drops incredibly low on that Bandit, but they're able to get the bosses onto the hammers here, making use of that damage. Of course, the damage is increased depending on how many people trigger that hammer. That's why you see all of them gather underneath, and then they drag in the mobs. And also the mobs themselves increase the damage. It's just any sort of extra target that gets hit. Unfortunately though, for a limit, they do get another Bandit. This can be very dangerous as it is Tyrannical. You see everyone dropping incredibly low, but managed to finish it off right as they were about to die. So good job on them. Gonna be finishing off the boss a little bit earlier than Deplete from Beyond with just like a second difference.
For all intents and purposes, they killed it at the exact same time. It looks like, unfortunately, it didn't quite have everyone underneath that final hammer. With all 5 players inside that hammer, with Platinum Pummeler below 30%, it should finish off the boss, and they had it at 35%. So looks like they didn't quite execute at the end there. Maybe it was because they still had No Mercy alive, but could have saved an extra 5-10 seconds there on their side. But so far, Complexity Limit and Deplete from Beyond are on exact same pace right now, and I don't think the overall damage output from this mage comp is going to be anything too different from what we see from Deplete from Beyond's triple hunter comp, but we'll end up seeing here. It looks like Fired Up ran ahead with Eric in order to spawn Cujo. They're not going to be dealing with the trash right now. They're just going to be attacking Cujo, pulling their friends out of the Nyalothan realm and popping their Bloodlust here on Cujo. Maybe they'll be pulling trash in later though. Oh, Rentari, that's not good.
So this is not going to cost them too much time because they were doing a Shadow Meld skip here anyway. So thankfully, they did finish off all of the living waste. They, I assume Rentari was supposed to line of sight and then use Shadow Meld to be aggro, but when going down, not costing too much time, but still, complexity limit. They're already fighting Cujo 60% here on a Tyrannical environment. And you see the amount of damage Fired Up is doing on his mage here with his initial combustion, just having such a huge amount of single target bursts.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the sort of power of the Fire Mage. It has ridiculous burst damage when your cooldowns are available, and of course he's playing that World Vein Fire Mage build, so you have a combust every minute and 10 seconds or so instead of only every 2 minutes. Of course that extra combustion is usually quite a bit weaker, but it's still good enough to the point where you want to run it in almost every single dungeon right there. So you're seeing just the single target output that Fire Mage can deal with. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and it looks like Limit is now pulling some more trash on top of the end of Cujo here. Again, it is bolstering, so that's why they are delaying this trash pull, but they still want to get the extra percentage. Unfortunately, they didn't manage to get the feigned death off of the charge here from Cujo. Usually you do have a hunter making sure he is the furthest target away, because the furthest target is always getting the jump from Cujo first, and if you feign death in the perfect moment, then he's just basically going to cancel the rest of the jumps, and that's usually what we see those teams doing. But it isn't as crucial as long as no one goes down to the jump. It's really not as big of a deal because we don't have any melees that need to run after the boss with those full range setups that they're running.
Yeah, and of course you can see as well the cleave. They pulled that trash at the same time Fired Up was using his second World Vein Combust, so he got some free ignite spread. The difference in the combust value with a full 2-minute combust with Font of Ishara, Corrupted Gladiator's badge, as well as your Mechagon bracers that reset your Fire Blast cooldown. The theoretical maximum is probably about 30% or so higher on your ignite value, but we're talking like your ignite is 200 to 250k instead of around 300k. So you're still getting a 250k ignite on your 2 off targets, which is 500k damage every 1.5 or 2 seconds. It's pretty ridiculous to think about the amount of free cleave that mages get when they combust. And I'm kind of surprised that we're not seeing more mages from other teams, especially from Dr. J. That's kind of his bread and butter to make that mage work in a lot of dungeons.
Yeah, I mean, I assume they must have tried it in this dungeon specifically, and they just agreed on it not being better. But it looks like Complexity Limit just figured out some way of making this Fire Mage work, or even having a better strategy with the mage instead of like this triple hunter comp that we've seen from most other teams. But yeah, Bolstering definitely makes it a little bit less efficient, I have to say, running the mage, just because you can't pull trash on top of the third boss immediately. So you can't get the full combustion value, at least not at the start. You can definitely combust late and then pull the trash on top. But yeah, definitely a little bit of a little less worth, I would say, compared to affix combinations where there's no bolstering on.
I think I know what the Void Elf Racial might be used for. Yep, blinking through this. Yes. Can you skip the rest of the gauntlet by doing that? No way.
Ooh,
they're just skipping the gauntlet.
So good. That is
Okay,
going to
so
save
this
them
is-
so much time.
That's a ridiculous time save.
Crazy.
Okay, so here's the thing. We knew about this tech for mages. Mages can blink through that barrier because it's not an actual barrier. It's just a wall. So similar to like the stairs in Atal'Dazar, mages can blink through the stairs before they actually spawn. It looks like Void Elf Racial uses the exact same function, so you can just blink through and not be in combo with the pack and just completely skip the gauntlet. Now, of course, they're gonna have to find out other trash percentage to pull along the way, but wow, that's inefficient trash anyways. Look, they have to deal with Blastotron, which is a single target enemy. You never want to pull single target enemies in the MDI.
This is an incredible amount of time that you can save with this strategy. And the fact that this is the team figuring it out, I'm pretty sure other teams are going to be watching this and are going to adapt to this strategy, because I don't see how this is not the best thing you can do. This is a huge amount of time. So you can see they're already now fighting Sparkflux, while Deplete from Beyond just now went into Obelisk. And yeah, you do have the difference in trash percentage, as Sarah mentioned, but it's so much more efficient to play trash where you can pull multiple mobs on top of each other and have some sort of AoE instead of single targeting them up. So this is an insane innovation here coming out of Complexity Limit. I'm speechless. This is such a nice strategy coming out of them. Even thinking about this kind of stuff, running the Void Elves here. Wow.
I mean, I was trying to think of what you could do, because I noticed that Fire Up was playing human instead of Void Elf, right? And I'm like, well, mages can blink through that platform at the gauntlet, and yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's the reason for the Void Elf here, unless they have something else planned. But I think the rest of the trash in the dungeon, including that final pack right in front of the boss. So yeah, there's a lot that they have to do. There's a lot left that they have to do, and you can see the advantage that they have here. They have 50% on a Tyrannical boss. They're behind by 17% in terms of trash percentages here, so we'll have to see how that's actually going to play out for them, but it's got to be, I would imagine it's got to be an advantage for them here, especially with the combust available for trash, any trash pull that they plan on pulling afterwards. Definitely impressive to see that.
Yeah, definitely. As they're now of course, fighting Spark Flux. Deplete from Beyond did manage to get to Spark Flux as well, and it really looks like they do have an insane amount of single target damage. But now we have the combustion come out of Complexity Limit. This is why, this is very likely why he was saving his combustion, because you just want to pull the trash on top of the boss at the very end. While Deplete from Beyond, I mean, they caught up quite a lot on the boss. It is a Tyrannical environment, so it's still 45% difference. Considering the trash, I do still think Deplete from Beyond has a chance to catch back up, because Limit will have to do an extra trash pull later on, right?
And they do all get hit by that beam, but because they're in that shield damage direction, that's a 75% damage direction, so they don't really have to worry about the damage from the fire beam. They didn't quite get, okay, they didn't get the second stack there. That could have been bad. The boss died before that beam hit them, so pretty efficient in terms of damage there, and you can see Max on that Prot Warrior doing a lot of AoE damage. Is he running Miraculous Fang in Workshop? He is. Wow,
Possible,
that's a very aggressive play. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see here. The trash percentages they're pretty far behind right now.
Yeah.
Still.
It looked like, okay, so I think it definitely looked like they were just slower here with the boss because of Fired Up just not doing the same amount of damage as the Hunters were doing. He didn't have his combustion available in the pool, and then he combusted at the end of the boss before they pulled in the trash, and it just seemed like Hunter would do a lot more damage there, and that, at least on the boss there. So that's why Deplete from Beyond did manage to catch up a little bit because of the DPS difference. And then on top of that, it looked like they pulled in the trash really late, while Deplete from Beyond pulled in the trash quite a bit earlier. As you can see, the boss is going down now for Deplete from Beyond, and the mobs are super low. So I think they just dealt with this trash quite a bit faster, and the boss as well from Deplete from Beyond side.
Oh yeah, and there's only one final advantage I can see for the Fire Mage here, of course, that being that they really gain a lot of damage from being able to combust the boss with those 3 Awakened mobs. The Awakened mobs for Limit are going to die much, much more quickly than Deplete from Beyond's will with that combustion available. And it looks like, yeah, they're going to have to pull pretty much the entire bridge pack. The question is, are they going to pull everything at the same time? Doesn't look like it right now. Maybe they're gearing up for it, though. Maybe they're waiting for this first short out and then they'll go? I have to imagine that's what they're planning on. No, they can't do that with Bolstering. There's no way.
It's Bolstering, yeah. I think they'll have to do this in 2 pulls. I still think this is more worth than dealing with this one single tank here. I would think it's more worth it on a Fortified environment, just because dealing with a single mob on Fortified, especially if it has such a huge amount of HP, is a huge damage loss. On Tyrannical, maybe not as much, but I still like the strategy. As they're just now finishing off the trash pack, Deplete from Beyond now arrive. The difference now is that Deplete from Beyond, once they dealt with this trash pack they're fighting, they're done with the trash. While Complexity Limit, they have to do the second pull here. So this is still an incredibly close game between those 2 teams.
I think this is actually going to end up being a neck-and-neck DPS battle between the 2 teams when we get to the boss, because they ended up engaging these trash packs at roughly the same time, and it looks like they're going to die at roughly the same time as well. So this is just going to be ridiculously close. One small thing that we need to mention as well, there is an advantage to running with this strategy with the Fire Mage as well. Every single time you pull a pack with those Tinkerers in it, they cast a hasty buff. Whoa, gotta calm down. Max, they're dropping to 1%, but doesn't quite go down. Twisted able to keep him up. That was a scary moment there. But back to that hasty buff. It's a spell stealable debuff that mages can do more damage with, which makes them competitive on the trash without popping combust. And we can see this is going to be neck and neck. The trash pack going down for Complexity Limit here. Just while Deplete from Beyond is dealing with this trash pack. Unfortunately, they're going to have to res Eric, so they're going to be pulling the boss probably slightly later than Deplete from Beyond.
Yeah, and this was the 1 death difference, right? Deplete from Beyond had 1 death from Mentari going down earlier, so Complexity Limit had a 5 seconds advantage. But now they lost this 5 seconds advantage. Now they're completely even. But Complexity Limit, they have the mage, right? They're pulling at the exact same time. Deplete from Beyond does not have Bloodlust available yet, though. They still have a 10 seconds cooldown, so they either use it late or they use it in phase 2. And we know just how much damage a mage can do on this pull here with Bloodlust. And now we see I'm Fired Up just popping his combustion and just nuking those Awakened mobs.
And you might think, oh, the combustion is done. He's not doing that much damage. Aha, yes. But the ignite will continue to tick for several seconds after the combustion. That's why you see his DPS still going up. You can see the Awakened mobs are getting shredded. And yeah, I mean, you can see the difference in damage. All of their Awakened mobs are below 30% now, whereas it looks like they're kind of just focusing down Zamorak on the side of Deplete from Beyond. And they get that damage buff on aerial unit as well with the combustion being applied to him, so they're going to have a little bit more boss damage because of that as well. That's going to be interesting, though, because it's going to come down to a single target battle at the end. This is going to be incredibly close.
Yeah, this is going to be super close. You can see the percentage of the aerial unit. It's completely even. Deplete from Beyond did now manage to go ahead, to get ahead a little bit, but they still have the 2 Awaken mobs to deal with. While Complexity Limit, because of the combustion, they're actually done with the Awaken mobs faster. And there's no way they can focus down the aerial unit before they finish off the Awaken mobs, because otherwise you're just going to die. Because once the aerial unit dies, you're going to get stunned until King Mechagon spawns, right?
No,
so,
Atrocity.
Oh no, they do have a Valorous available, but this is another 5 seconds. And in such a close game, this will matter a lot.
It will matter a lot here as well. And you can see that Complexity Limit still does have a slight lead in terms of boss damage, but that 5 seconds on the board is pretty much going to close the gap. I would say that these teams are essentially dead on in terms of what their progression is right now. And you know what? We can actually time that based off of when this boss dies. Let's keep an eye on this. Aerial unit going down for Complexity Limit at, let's count it, 15:05 on their timer. Let's see when it goes down for Deplete from Beyond. 15:09. So actually a 1 second advantage for Deplete from Beyond with that death timer. It's going to come down to who can do more single target damage.
Okay, this is all going to come down to the amount of DPS those teams can do on this boss. And we're going to see the difference in comp now. I mean, the mage is going to do a lot more damage when he's got the combust up, but the hunters are doing more consistent damage. And now the combust is coming up out of fired up here, but it's going to be a smaller combust. I'm pretty sure he did use the bigger one at the start of phase 1. So definitely a little bit of a smaller burst coming out of the mage here, but you can see how low the Omega Buster is dropping here. It is a tyrannical environment, so this different in DPS matters quite a bit, but the mage's damage is also going to fall off. So after the initial burst, Deplete from Beyond is probably going to catch up.
I mean, I think it's all going to come down to whether or not the boss lives long enough to give him a second combust. If he gets that second combust off in this phase, I could see Complexity Limit using that burst to pull ahead here, but it's going to be close. This boss is going to last about a minute and 20-ish seconds, I believe, on this difficulty on Tyrannical, so he just might get some of that combust in, but this is going to be super close. Complexity Limit is 8% ahead on the boss with a 5-second death timer. This is ridiculously close.
Yeah, you can see they're a little bit ahead on the percentage here, but the 5 seconds with the death. And you see the Deplete from Beyond is slowly catching up on that percentage.
The combustion's available, he's using it.
Consistent damage, there we go. We have the big combust coming out of Fired Up now. So the boss is going to die incredibly quickly here. You see the Deplete from Beyond has no way of competing with that burst coming out of the Fire Mage here. Unfortunately, Fired Up had to block though because of the positioning of the shock bots. So did lose probably a little bit of damage having to use that ice block, but Omega Buster is about to go down. Then King Mechagon spawns, and if Deplete from Beyond is not going to kill it within 5 seconds extra, then it's going to be Complexity Limit. Moving on, and I don't think they're going to make it 5 seconds.
It's going to come down to the 5 seconds here. King Mechagon has plopped down for Deplete from Beyond. Count the timer here. 3,
They made
2,
it.
I think Deplete from Beyond has somehow done it.
Whoa! Deplete
this
from
was so
Beyond,
close.
2 seconds. Just like 2 seconds and that's it, and they take the map and stay alive. What a workshop there, Tuttles.
Oh man, that is
Dude, all right,
actually, yeah, dude. There was a lot to unpack in that dungeon. I'll be honest. I do not. Oh man, that pathing from Complexity Limit. I still don't know what was better in between like the 5-pack at the top of the landing versus the waste in the waste processing unit.
That was
Like,
insane.
I
I
think
mean,
there's
especially
a-
the.
I think
there's
it's
a
better,
lure
but
of
I
it
think
being
they
a
executed their third boss worse compared to the Deplete from Beyond, and that's why they made up the time. I think so. I'm not really sure. It's hard to tell.
It just like adjusting the routes. We always kind of talked as well as Iro about like, oh yeah, it's just like an on the rails dungeon. This is just what everybody does for their route, and that just went completely out of the window in this one.
Oh yeah, I mean, we were all racking our brains right there trying to figure out what that Void Elf thing was, and it turns out it's actually incredibly cool. It all came down to those random deaths. That one death at the end of the trash pack is what lost them that dungeon, unfortunately. So I'm sure there are other tiny little improvements that both teams could have made here, but that was a fantastic match to watch.
It really was. Titles, let's break it down. What do you got for us on this fantastic game?
Man, oh man, we have a lot of interesting things that we can discuss. So first and foremost, the teams were really neck and neck coming into killing this first boss. Good utilization out of the hammer. Honestly, super happy to see both teams utilizing the hammer in a great way, even moving on upwards towards that 21 level. It's hard to use the hammer correctly a lot of the times, especially whenever you want to get your tank in to be able to get bonus damage. But these teams do it great. Deplete from Beyond with the waste processing units into Cujo here with the 2 junkyard dogs. Honestly, being able to get this perfect while managing bolstering is no easy feat. And then you have the Void Elf skip that was talked about. Everybody jumps over that gate after that pack of dogs and stuff like that ends up getting killed. So you're able to skip the Blastotron and those Mark 1 robots. But in return, you have to play the pack at the top of the landing. This pack at the top of the landing is not... I don't know. I think the pack at the top of the landing is pretty bad. It's hard to really determine how much time you're going to be saving because, like Jack was stating earlier, this dungeon is so on the rails that it's really hard to even innovate at all. So whenever somebody comes up with something like jumping over the gate and skipping the Blastotron, I don't know if it's even better because like we saw Deplete from Beyond still win, but it's really hard to gauge like how much time that's ultimately going to save you.
That's right. And
I think it's actually like the bolstering made it slightly worse than it is because they're not having the shadow melt, right? So they can't do the same living waste pull where you pull everything, you kill the living waste, and then you shadow melt off the aggro, right? They can't do that because they're void elves. So I think they just having the bolstering affix makes this strategy that they try to pull off not as good as it usually is. Otherwise, I think it's definitely going to be better, and it's definitely something that other teams are probably going to adapt to.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's most interesting is what do these teams have to do in order to make the strategy work? Because there are some crazy benefits to it, as we saw, but there's also some negative side effects that they had to think about, and that's just one of the most interesting things, I think, as well here, Tettles, that, yeah, there's a really cool strategy that can give them an advantage, but it's also, they're also the only ones doing it, so it hasn't really been pushed out to everybody to see how much more it can be refined.
True, it absolutely has not been refined to its ultimate form. I do still question the mage choice, I'll be honest with you. I still think that the triple hunter is going to give you a significant boss damage advantage in a dungeon like this.
What do you think about that one as well, Zyro? We've seen some mages in here, and we've seen some that aren't. Curious to what your thoughts are.
I'm curious. So we don't have DPS numbers for that dungeon in just yet. Let me see here. If we look at our DPS numbers for the dungeons earlier in the day where he played mage, I believe he played mage in the first matchup against Golden Guardians, right? And his damage is significantly higher, but the question that I have in my mind with the mage choice is the mage killing the ads faster better for your overall damage? Hunters get to rapid reload more if ads are up.
Okay, it's mage on bolstering workshop too, so killing the ads faster is not always going to be a bigger time save, and you, again, like you were saying, is better overall actually a faster dungeon? And sometimes better overall does not always equate to a faster dungeon.
That's true. And we're also going to be looking at bolstering for Freehold as well. So this is another factor that we got to continue coming back to on this one, Nagura. And hopefully it'll be another lightning quick dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, Freehold, definitely a dungeon we've seen done really quickly earlier by some of the other teams. But we haven't seen Deplete from Beyond or Complexity Limit play Freehold yet. So we'll see how those two teams do. And it can be very volatile because you have that bolstering affix. Any sort of mistake can cause huge bolster stacks on the mobs, and then on top of that we also saw issues with the last boss. We saw huge team wipes come in when the teams were trying to kill all 4 awakened mobs with the last boss, and then we've also seen the kiting strat. So definitely lots of different kind of strategies coming in that Freehold.
Yep, and there's going to be a lot of potential for these teams to start making some differences, but first we got to be looking at Harlan Sweet here, Zyro. Let's check out some stats.
That's an impressively low average wipe count based off of what we've seen that can happen on this boss, especially once teams started adapting to that kite strategy, right? That's a pretty low failure rate for the kite strategy in this dungeon. I'd be very surprised to see a winning team here not go for that strategy.
Yep, and it's been one of those like bars that's been set for a pretty long time now, I think, as well, Tettles, where they say, all right, grab them, kite, let's go. People are able to see what's going on with it, and it seems pretty well fleshed out.
I do think that the healers, the longer the longer that they've been able to kite in these dungeons, they are getting more well-refined with how the kiting should look. I think Atal'Dazar is a significantly more difficult dungeon to be able to kite obelisks in, and I think that both Igloo and Twisted should be able to kite in Freehold really easily if they do make it there.
Yeah, and we've just seen how well they've also been able to make the most of their space. We've seen time and time again how these teams have been just allowing the Breaker of Heroes, Urgroth, making sure that he gets close enough, not having any extra issues of him getting snapped back, and it's becoming more and more rare over time. So let's see what both of these teams have in store, because our final match in the series is about to get underway. Freehold, let's get it.
All right, so this time around, we don't see Fired Up on the Mage. Did switch to the Hunter, so this might actually be the first time we see the Triple Hunter, at least this tournament, come out of Complexity Limit, because we've seen them play Mage in a lot of the other dungeons. But it is Bolstering, so definitely just having less value with the Combustion on top of bosses just makes sense for them to run Hunter here, as we see both of the teams popping that Bloodlust on the initial trash pool.
It looks... correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like Deplete from Beyond is opting to go for a lot less trash percentage than we see from Complexity Limit here. Only going for that one pull needed to spawn the boss, only 7%. That's the lowest amount of trash we've seen pulled with the first boss by any team, by a large amount. And
they commit the Bloodlust to it too, on just a 7% trash pull. That is very interesting to see. Complexity Limit, though, on the other hand, they're gonna be like 15, 16, 17% almost. So yeah, huge amount of trash difference here already from the get-go. Deplete from Beyond, of course, is going to be pulling the boss earlier because they pulled a lot less trash. So we'll see how they're going to make up that missing trash percent later. Now, Freehold can be a dungeon where trash that you do earlier is not actually going to make a huge difference because of the amount of RP that you have to wait for in the Ring of Booty, right? You can't do the Ring of Booty faster. You have to wait for the pig to spawn, you have to wait for Ludwig to spawn, you have to wait for Trotek to spawn. So if they can make up for that missing trash in that Ring of Booty area, then it's not actually a time loss for them.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you can already see here that that extra trash they pulled here on this Bolstering affix is going to be an issue. It's put them 25% behind in boss HP on this first boss, and that's not insignificant on Fortified. They really need to kind of clean up on these pulls afterwards. Of course, Deplete from Beyond, it looks like they're going to be gearing up with this trash percentage to go for bigger pulls later on, and they're not doing the customary thing we see for teams that go for smaller pulls here, where you would pull trash onto Sky Captain Crag near the end of the boss for a little bit of extra efficiency. Misty Igloo there, getting hit by the frontal, dropping down to 10% HP, but able to heal himself up before Grievous ticks on not that big of an issue, and see them moving on to the rest of the dungeon here, opting not to use their Shadow Meld skips here. Of course, the Hunters are running that Dwarf debuff instead of Night Elf. But they're just going for the Feign Death skip instead of just Shadow Melding fading off the Hunters. So that's a little bit of a time increase, I think, over the typical strategy.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it also, maybe they want to use their Shadow Meld right after this. Definitely, because they have the Feign Death available on the Hunters with a shorter cooldown. But Rentari and Igloo, they are relying on that Shadow Meld. And yeah, this is a pull we haven't seen a lot. This is actually something that most teams skip, this trash pack. And this might actually just be the trash they're doing because they didn't do it at the start. It really seems inefficient to do this. I gotta admit, because they commit the Bloodlust on the very first trash pull, right? So why not pull more trash on top? Why do this trash pull instead when you commit that Bloodlust for the very initial pull? It seems like a very weird decision being made here by Deplete from Beyond.
I think we can start to think about what strategy they're going to be going for on the side of Deplete from Beyond purely because of that Dwarf racial, right? They have to be going for cleaving down the four Awakened Mobs of the final boss. It wouldn't make sense to run Dwarf otherwise. You want that extra way to remove the fear debuffs from Samurek, the Beckoner of Chaos, and you wouldn't really do that if you're just kiting the boss around. So that's the only thing that I can think of. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not really sure. I'm confused by this strategy, to be honest, because they have to be confident in this strat. Because yesterday we've seen Freehold being played by other teams. So if they saw other teams play Freehold and they figured that their strategy is not up to par with the other Freeholds, then they could have adjusted their strategy, right? So I think that they're actually confident in their own strategy that it is going to be fast. So there definitely has to be something that they do, which is different to other teams. They will make up some time later on. But at this point, they're definitely behind compared to Complexity Limit, even though there's a little bit of a trash percentage difference in favor of Deplete from Beyond. I don't think it's gonna make up for just the dungeon speed they're behind.
Yeah, and of course, both teams going for the same strategy here, leaving Captain Raul alive while pulling trash mobs on top of him. I'm not quite sure if that was the bad brew because the Captain Raul got hit by it and they wanted to pull the trash mobs into that. I would imagine they would pull trash mobs into that if it was the bad brew because otherwise you're missing out on a ton of free percentage damage all over the place. But Raul goes down first for Complexity Limit while Deplete from Beyond is just now downing the second boss. Both teams, however, going to be cleaning up that trash afterwards. It looks like we're getting it a slightly faster for Complexity Limit though.
Yeah, it looks like they're slightly faster as they're now going to be moving on. We've seen some teams do a trash pull after this boss before they go to the Ring of Duty, but most teams have started doing a skip here. And it looks like both Complexity Limit and Deplete from Beyond are doing that skip. Igloo, though, unfortunately getting a little bit of aggro as they're running through here. And it looks like Deplete from Beyond is actually dealing with this trash. Yeah, so they're doing a huge trash pull here, while Complexity Limit is moving on to Ludwig instead.
Oh yeah, and I'd imagine they'll be pulling some crushers with Ludwig, which is the typical norm that we've seen here. Of course, this is kind of weird that they haven't pulled the... Okay, there we go, here we go. Pulling the two crushers and now on top of Ludwig, going to be cleaving these three down. Deplete from Beyond, like you mentioned, going for a very interesting pull pattern. I don't think we've ever seen this pulled in this particular way before, and we'll have to see if it works out for them. I mean, this is an okay strategy to do because you're going to have to deal with this trash eventually at some point. Usually we see this used as sort of like a stepping stone to the final boss, right? You deal with Trothak, and this is the pull that you go ahead and pull while you're running to the final boss after you kill Trothak. Now you're just running, right? You're not actually dealing with anything while you're doing that. So I don't really get it. Maybe they're going to use the Awakened Obelisk to get up afterwards so they don't need to deal with the trash right now. It's very weird.
Yeah, definitely interesting. It looked like while Rentari and the three hunters were fighting that trash, Igloo actually moved on to the Ring of Booty and dealt with the pig. So it looked like the hunter that triggered the event didn't actually deal with the pig. Usually we have the hunter go over, trigger the event, wait for the pig, and then do it. So once you're done with the second boss, you can immediately move forward to Ludwig, as we saw Complexity Limit do it. But the Deplete from Beyond only had their hunter trigger the event to spawn a pig, and then Igloo was dealing with the pig once they were done with the boss and they were doing this trash pack. So different strategies here for those teams. As Complexity Limit did down Ludwig already, they're now gathering up a really substantial pull. This is like half the dungeon basically, so they want to make sure they're dealing with bolstering properly on this pull.
Yeah, I'm confused. I guess I'm not confused. I'm just looking at the strategy we're running, and we've seen both of these strategies run in this dungeon before. Sorry, not Method Dene, I was about to say Method Dene. Golden Guardians, we saw running a similar strategy to what Deplete from Beyond is doing, where they're opting to, it looks like, not go for the kiting strategy. But we know that strategy, even if perfected flawlessly, is a good minute slower than the kiting strategy. So I don't know if they just aren't comfortable with Igloo kiting or if it's not something he's comfortable doing in general, but it's weird to commit to a strategy that you know is slower potentially.
So I definitely think that because we've seen teams wipe to the strategy where you play the Awaken mobs. We haven't seen anyone wipe to the kiting strategy just yet, at least not this weekend, right? So to be honest, I feel like the kiting strat seems easier compared to the playing the Awaken mobs, because playing 4 Awaken mobs with Grievous and with the limited amount of space that you have on Heartland Seed, while also getting knocked around and people having to kite that artillery, just seems more difficult than having your healer kite, right? So I think, especially on Bolstering, it really doesn't seem worth it to take that extra risk and play them. Of course, the Awaken mobs do give percentage, but you can't play any other trash with Harlan Street, at least not early on in that fight. And we've seen the Golden Guardians perfect that strategy, right? And even the Golden Guardians were slower than people who did the kiting strat, even with like a perfect execution that we saw out of the Golden Guardians. So I really think when you have bolstering, it's just always going to be better to do the kiting strat.
Yeah, I agree. And it's going to come down to execution here as well. Twisted still does have to pull off the kiting strat, and they do actually have to keep playing this dungeon quickly because Bolstering can get out of control. Of course, once those Crushers die, they don't actually bolster anything next to them because they're so much taller than everything else. Z-axis issues in WoW can be weird like that sometimes, but they're doing a good job not killing any of this trash before Trothak dies. It looks like Deplete from Beyond will not be pulling trash on top of Trothak, so they're going to need to finish off that 15% trash. But if I had to guess, the rest of their trash percentage is just going to come from killing the Awakened mobs, and then maybe finishing off trash with Harlan bombs at the very end of the boss so they don't actually end up bolstering him. If they pulled that off, with where both teams are in the dungeon right now, Deplete from Beyond could take this game.
I mean, Deplete from Beyond, looking at the percentage, I think they have enough percentage by killing the Ravagers, right? Theoretically, they could still just kite.
That too, yeah.
I think they might be kiting as... I think all of the Ravagers packs should give them enough percentage to not actually need the Awakened mobs. And we actually see them pull the Ravager packs here. You see Rentari dealing with those 3 mobs, while it looks like the other 3 are being kited. I'm not really sure if there was an intentional pull here with the officers. It looks like it was intentional as they're pulling it into this Ravager pack, getting the last couple of percentage from the Painful Motivation. That is going to go off in a second, but Rentari dropping incredibly low. So they want to make sure, there we go, Painful Motivation is going off. He's going to have to Shadow Melt off the aggro from the rest of those mobs because they're going to be bolstered. There we go, Shadow Melt coming out of Rentari. Everyone else using Shadow Melt and Feign Death as well. And now they're up to 100%. Now they're going to have to start the kiting strat. And yeah, Deplete from Beyond, this is going to be their game. They have 100% trash. They're ready to pull the boss. If they pull this off, they're going to be ahead. Complexity limit, still dealing with trash.
Yeah, no, I guess I was just completely wrong here. But what's the dwarf racial for then? I don't get it. Whatever. Who am I to question to question the giant Giga Brain Dr. J? I mean, they've always come up with these things before. And the thing is, Complexity Limit had to deal with that one commander trash pack beforehand. So they're going to be pulling the boss way after Deplete from Beyond. Complexity Limit needs Igloo to somehow mess up kiting, or needs one of their hunters to go down. That's really all they can get. They're not going to out DPS Deplete from Beyond. There's no way. They're way too far ahead.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be Deplete from Beyond's game if they manage to finish off that kiting strat properly. You see Igloo running around on the Ring of Booty here. It's going to be very crucial on how Igloo does the kiting here. There's lots of areas that can cause the mobs to snap to him if he steps on any wrong areas on the ground. So you need to be very careful to not jump in the wrong position, doesn't go on top of any sort of pebble, to make sure that ads do not snap to him, because if they snap, he's going to get one shot. There's no way he can survive a melee attack from all of those Awakened mobs at the same time. And if Eagle goes down, they're all going to snap back to the rest of their team, and then it's just going to be a team wipe. So, I mean, looking at Complexity Limit, they caught up quite a bit on damage, but it's not enough, right? Look at the HP difference on Harlan Street right now. Deplete from Beyond is just going to be their game to win, and it's a clean run as well. Clicks is dropping incredibly low, though, and Rentari as well, with 4 Grievous stacks on him.
I mean, there is no way that Complexity Limit will be able to catch up in terms of damage here, but Urgroth Breaker of Heroes has snapped back to the group, and if he manages to get a Spirit Breaker on Rentari, that could spell the end here. All eyes are on Rentari here. They have to get Harlan Sweet down before anything can happen, and Deplete from Beyond, even with the mistake at the end, is going to be able to take the game and the series over Complexity Limit and move on in our lower bracket.
How these guys have been getting better and better at kiting, but right there, just the mob snapping back.